Now it's time to move to another point of our today's program, which is a European chat. European chat is a smaller, let's say, format for discussion that we are used to do here at the Prague European Summit, because European chat is shorter when it comes to time. It's more informal, and it is also presenting less speakers than the normal plenary discussion. And right now, this European chat will focus on the European vision for Ukraine. And I would like to welcome here the three speakers, the great speakers of this European chat. I would like to ask Alexandra Matvichuk, President of the Center for Civil Liberties, to join us here. And I would like to also welcome here Monika Ladmanova, Head of the European Commission representation to the Czech Republic, to also join the stage. And last but not least, I would like to welcome here Mr. Jaroslav Zajíček, Director of the Foreign Policy Department of the Office of the President of the Czech Republic. This European chat is kind of special because we decided to not appoint the official moderator. So it will be a very, let's say, informal discussion, and it's kind of experiment. So we will see how it goes. And of course, I will be ready sitting somewhere there to come up with some question if it is necessary. But yes, it's European chat, so you can chat very freely. The topic is clear. It is European vision for Ukraine. I would like to hear from you not only your vision, but also the role of the European Union in the future of Ukraine. I would like to also hear some comments on how to further strengthen Ukraine and its democratic principles and its ties with European partners, for example. And to help you to start, I prepared the first question, and I would like to start with Alexandra. What is your vision for Ukraine? Where do you see Ukraine at the end of this decade? What can we expect? What is your even dream about the Ukraine in the future? So please, the floor is yours.
Maybe I will start with my personal story, because when I was in school, I dreamed to be a theater director, to make performances in the theater. But in the school, I got acquainted with Soviet dissidents, and I was ingrained in the Ukrainian dissident circle. And I met with people from the books of history. And they were fantastic people, people who say what they think and do what they say. People who had a bravery to stood up their voice against the whole totalitarian Soviet machine. And from that time, I know that when you have no other instruments but just your own words and your own position, it's not so little. These people were subjected to prison, to forcible psychological treatment. Some of them were killed, but they didn't stop, and then they succeed. I, as a children, was in their circle, and I was so inspired by this example that I decided to study law, not go to the theater, and myself fighting for freedom and for human dignity. So how I see Ukraine in the future, I see Ukraine as a country where the work of my organization, Center for Civil Liberties, in current format is not needed anymore. And I can fulfill, finally, my child dream.
Alexandra, if I may, I just would like to pay you a big respect for everything what you do and what you achieved, and the Nobel Peace Prize is very well deserved. So I'm glad that you didn't decide for the theater career and that you are here with us today. And we just agreed with Jaroslav that you should be the first to talk, because of course you are the most distinguished guest here. And also I wanted to ask you how you feel when we in Europe sometimes hear, and you must hear it as well in Ukraine, all this fatigue of the war. I think that it must be very difficult. I would be so frustrated being in Ukraine.
I think that it's very human to feel fatigue and to cover with the word something else, because I think that it's not fatigue. It's a lack of decisive decisions. What do I mean? When large-scale invasion started, the civilized world told, let's help Ukraine not to fail. And Ukraine obtained first weapons to be able to defend ourselves. And first serious economic sanctions were introduced into force. And we are extremely grateful because this helped us to survive and to resist to so enormous opposing power as Russia is. But this is a time to change this narrative to another one. Let's help Ukraine to win fast, because there is a huge differences between let's help Ukraine not to fail and let's help Ukraine to win fast. We can practically measure these differences in types of weapons, in gravity of sanctions, and speed of decisions. So we have to work with this formula that international partner will be with us as long as it takes. It's not a strategy. We have to reframe this formula. We will be with you as long as Russia will be defeated. And this is a goal. So we have to set this ambitious goal, because when we have the common goal, we can have a common strategy, and then we can find resources to fulfill this common strategy. So if we feel fatigue, if we are bored with the situation, let's stop it. Let's help Ukraine to win fast and solve this problem.
If I may add, the vision of the future is for Ukraine to be the core of the European Union. That's the vision that we have. And first of all, I need to join my colleague in paying respect to you. The Nobel Prize is well deserved. I remember in 2012, I believe 10 years before, you received it, that the EU received the EU Nobel Prize for Peace. And at that time, it was, subject to raised eyebrows in many respects, and we only understand now what it meant. So in many respects, this is part of the legacy, and I'm very happy that it is you. That's number one. So maximum respect. Second, I'm here in several incarnations, and why I mention this is that in all of these, there's a way how we can help you, and this is probably the core task. If we share the vision, the goal, how can we help you? I was part of the EU accession team back in the 90s and in early 2000s, and I do remember how difficult it was not to be subject to fatigue, to be negotiating thoroughly, to be able to sell the story and convince the others that you belong to the club. And we can spend some time in demonstrating how Czechia has been instrumental and will be in helping you on this way once again. Then the Czech presidency was already mentioned, and I remember we were jointly with the politicians, of course, the politicians as number one, rewriting the priorities of the Czech presidency. And you can ask everyone, at least in Brussels, that we made particular emphasis on participation of the Ukrainian ministers, debriefs going to you and putting on the agenda of the Czech presidency topics that have always been helping Ukraine. And the third incarnation, of course, is my current one, and I don't need to demonstrate probably for too long the determination on the side of the Czech president. I would just summarize it with the motto that we all know that Ukraine has to win, and we need to do our utmost to help you to win.
I support this suggestion because representing the European Commission here, and we've heard it on the panel before, that the European Commission clearly defined the vision for Ukraine, and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said it clearly that the future of Ukraine is in the EU, and we have to do the utmost to support this. And I bring with me the list which has been published recently as a part of the enlargement package where European Commission proposed and recommended to the member states to to open the negotiations with Ukraine. So there will be a decision made, hopefully in December at the summit in Brussels, that the leaders of the member states will decide. I hear that Czech Republic will definitely go in this direction and follow what the European Commission suggested. And I have been amazed when I've read the findings of the evaluation report. I would recommend to everybody to read only the key findings, not to go through the 150 pages. But in every area, Ukraine had some level of preparations. Despite the war, despite the fact that there are people dying, that every day there are alarms asking people to go to some safe space, etc. Just a little remark, if I may. There are still about 5 countries in the European Union, the current member states, who didn't manage to ratify Convention of the Council of Europe, which is to protect victims of gender-based violence. And Ukraine did in July, during the wartime. I mean, you are doing such an amazing job in Ukraine in progressing. Of course, in the economic parameters, it's not easy, and there is still a little bit of lacking behind the necessary criteria, but everything can be remedied in this sense. It's so understandable that it doesn't work for the economic areas at this very moment. But again, the vision of European Commission for Ukraine is in the EU, in the heart of the EU. It's a security measure as well. I think that we've never faced, and we repeat it again and again, since the Second World War, when the democratic world grown. There are many more countries than before the Second World War. We never faced such a threat as we are now. One thing which is clear now for everybody in the EU and outside, it is clear who is our external enemy. And it is such an evidence about it, but it was not clear before the February 24th, 2022. We know who is our enemy. We know also who is our enemy in the Middle East and the enemy in Asia. But with Russia, I think that it's very good that we have this understanding now, and that we have to work on this basis in the EU.
What can be said? You spoke about fatigue, and again, you might have heard the president on repeated occasions stressing that we need to fight the fatigue together, because this is what the adversary expects us to do, to get tired of it, to have new conflicts, new biases, and simply to wear us out. This is a strategy that should not succeed. That's very, very important. Actually, if you look a couple of years back, I would even mention something like enlargement fatigue. There has been, within the EU, within several member states, not to quote anyone, but I heard it on repeated occasions, no more microphones. You have to just imagine the situation when a group of 6 or 9 countries are sitting around a small table discussing the future of Europe, and all of a sudden you've got a room twice as big as this one. You don't even see who is sitting on the other side of the table telling you what you should do or should not. That's something that is a change of a mindset for several. And I would say that I still see a very nice window of opportunity with what has been happening to sell you as the success story that you want to get to the club. I feel a new impetus. I feel new atmosphere, changed atmosphere in many respects. Of course, the question will be then again, how to organize even ourselves. But right now there is a momentum for you. When I looked back, I thought this is difficult to be repeated, but everybody got an idea that the new, at that time, new member states after the fall of the Iron Curtain should get into the club as soon as possible. But we only applied in 1996. We started negotiations in 1998-9, and we finished 2002. I believed that was the super fastest thing. Look at you. You put forward your application. You got the status. All within a month, and maybe by the end of the year you will have a decision to open the EU accession talks. This is something that I would have never believed that is possible to replicate, and here you are.
maybe I will, based on what something was said, and tell that we can overcome the current situation with a spirit. Because spirit is something which can't be converted in numbers, but it's something which can change their reality and define the future. Because when Putin started this large-scale invasion, he was confident that Ukraine will fall in 3 or 4 days. And not just Putin, our international partners also thought the same, because, look, Russia was 11th economy in the world. Russia has a much greater military potential, a much bigger population. But suddenly, it became obvious that people who have spirit and who are fighting for their freedom and their human dignity are much more powerful than even the second army in the world. So we have to take the spirit into account. And for the spirit, it's very important to have the intermediate positive news. And let me tell you what, from Ukrainians' prisma, what means for ordinary Ukrainians this decision of European Commission, which provides a green line for, I hope, positive decision of EU Council in December. 9 years ago, millions of Ukrainians stood up their voice against corrupt and authoritarian government who stopped the Euro-integration process. In the day when it was happened, I myself with a team put European flag on the window of our office. It was our protest that probably our government stopped the integration process, but we're still moving. We are on our way. So millions of people bravely demonstrated just for a chance to build a country where the rights of everybody are protected, government is accountable, judiciary is independent, and police do not beat students who are peacefully demonstrating. And we all paying a high price for this, because the whole state machine started deliberate persecution against peaceful protesters around the country. And I was the coordinator of civil initiative Euromaidan SOS at that time. We brought up several thousands of people. We worked 24 hours per day and to provide legal and other kind of assistance to persecuted protesters. And every day, hundreds and hundreds of people who were beaten, arrested, tortured, accused in fabricated criminal or administrative charge pass through our care. People can be kidnapped and arrested only for wearing the EU ribbons on their clothes. And then you know that it's resulted in massive gunning down of peaceful protesters in the center square of Kiev. More than 100 people were killed by police. They were unarmed, and you can find the photo and videos from this scene, which is horrible, and show how people was killed like in a special polygon. So people were dying under EU and Ukrainian flags. And probably we Ukrainians are the only nation who give our blood for EU values. And for us, such decision, it have a significant impact. Yes, we are a nation in transit. We have to do a lot to be in line with all standards. We understand our responsibility. But this decision shows us that we are on the right track. And it's important to see your goal in some nearest visible future. Because when you see your goal clearly, it provides you energy and spirit to go faster, even during the large-scale war.
I truly hope that the wider society in Europe understands that Ukrainians are fighting for all of us, for entire Europe, because otherwise, especially in the Central Eastern European countries, there will be I think, backlash as well. But this is something what we are repeating again and again, and maybe in the last months, as you said, you know, after a year and I don't know, 10 months of war, we have to make sure that it is still heard that Ukrainians are fighting for all of us in the battlefield. That this is not only for your country, it's for Europe, and we are not living in an easy context these days. There are more, and I just hope that Ukrainians won't be exhausted and won't show the fatigue, because this would be a disaster for all of us.
I can assure you that we have no luxury to feel fatigue, because we are in a war. If you became fatigued, you will be killed. It's very visible. We have no other choice. This war has a genocidal character. If we stop fighting, there will be no more us. And we understand that we're fighting not just for Ukrainians. Even more, we are fighting for a chance for democratic future of Russia itself. And this is very understandable for my friend and colleagues, Russian human rights defenders, with whom we all these years working on the cases of illegally detained Ukrainians in Russia and occupied territories of Russia. And when I ask them how I can be helpful, because they are faced with enormous challenges. They are labeled as foreign agent. Some of them have to leave the country. Some of them under criminal prosecution. The human rights organization in Russia is closed and banned, and still they doing their job honestly, and they always respond. If you want to help us, please be successful. Because success of Ukraine will provide us a chance for democratic future of Russia itself.
What I'm convinced of is that Ukraine needs good news. You need good news, especially during these difficult times. And that's why I'm convinced that by the end of the year there will be a positive decision, because people do realize what you are going through. And it's our part of the job to keep reiterating to everyone else what you are going through. What you need is not only symbolic help. I know symbols do help. That's why the Czech president traveled within the first 100 days not only to Kiev but also to Dnipro to show that we are there with you. President Zelensky was already in Prague as well. The first lady was also in Kiev as well. These are the symbolic things. Then you need to convince the partners and the rest of the world about the narrative, because what you feel here in Prague is not shared 100% in the rest of the world. On the contrary, there are many places in the world that understand the other narrative, and it's our joint task to help fight the other narrative with our own experience and with our own words. So this is what you need as well. And in very practical terms, you will need allies and friends that will try to push your case through. In December will be the closest opportunity. And then on an everyday basis, what you need as well is even ministries helping your ministries getting ready for the EU accession. The sooner you'll be prepared, and it's also part of the exercise to convince not only the Commission but also the member states that you are ready. You're fulfilling the Copenhagen criteria. That is fine. But then you need to convince many in the EU that you will be ready to withstand all the pressure, and that your administration will be ready in this respect. And this is our task, and we do that. I've got that long list of all the line ministries that are helping within twinning projects or inviting their Ukrainian colleagues to Prague to show you in very specific areas, starting with taxation or social affairs, how to best prepare for the EU accession. That's part of the exercise. So I do believe that here in Prague, you should feel very comfortable about getting all of this, from super political gestures, symbols, to everyday work. But you have to realize that this is not the case everywhere around the world, and that's part of our joint task.
Sure, and the Deputy Minister mentioned about so-called neutrality of some countries to this Russian war against Ukraine. And I always try to define the things clearly. I think it's not neutrality, because people, especially leaders of the state, can't be neutral to violation of international law. They can't be neutral to human suffering. It's not neutrality, it's indifference. And this means that we have a task to build these horizontal ties between people. Because when I tell the stories of war crimes which we documented now in Ukraine, this horror and this pain is understandable for all people, regardless their citizenship, their religions, their color of skin, their ideology, their political views, and all other criteria. Because first and foremost, we are human beings. And the war is probably the most horrible things which can happen in human life. But these dramatic times provide us an opportunity to express the best in us, to be courageous, to fight for freedom, to make difficult but right choices, to take burden of responsibility and to help each other. Because when we help in each other, when we're risking our life for each other, this is something which makes us acutely aware what does it mean to be human beings. And I try to be not in my bubble, and that's why I always follow the sociology in Ukraine, and sociology confirms that the general mood of Ukraine is high, and people have no even doubt that we have to continue our fight for democracy and for our dignity. But probably the best this spirit will be explained with the story which I want to share with you. The story was recently told me by my friend who was born and lived and provided her childhood in a small town. I will not name this town, it can be dangerous for people whom I want to mention, because this town is now under Russian occupation. And when Russians occupied the territories, they do several things. First, they started deliberately exterminate active local people there. It's not just mayors or local deputies, it's journalists, writers, artists, priests, volunteers. Also, they banned Ukrainian language and Ukrainian culture, and they start this process of eroding Ukrainian identity, which is a part of genocidal policy which Russia brings to Ukrainian territory. And they obliged children in a school to start their day with singing Russian Aitan, Russian national song. And one boy kept silence and didn't sing, and the teacher asked him, why you not join and not sing with others? He told, I don't know the words of the national Russian song. And teacher told, go home and learn by heart, and tomorrow we will look of your success. And next day, when this boy came to school, the teacher forced him to stand around the whole group and to start to sing the Russian national song. And this child suddenly started to sing Ukrainian national song. And for sure, it was a very difficult implication after this gesture, because security service came to his family, started to provide searches and arrest his father. But I told to myself, if kids in a school resist to Russian occupation, how we can tell that we are tired? How we can tell that we are deprived of the fight for people who live under Russian terror? Ukraine in this war, fighting not just for territories, but first and foremost for people who live there. We have no moral rights to leave our people alone for torture and death.
I believe that this goes for each of us, and this is why we are all obliged to join and not to be blind and not to repeat these things like, there is a fatigue and Zelensky should take off his pullover and wear a proper jacket, etc. So when we see this speed, as you said, and what you need to see, how things develop. I just want to recall that it was 24th of February when the war and the aggression of Russians started, and it was 28th of February when Ukraine submitted its application for the EU. It was amazing that you were so determined as a nation to join this club where we've heard it at the panel before. There are still internal discussions, who is more, if president of this institution or that institution, etc. I know it's a democratic process, but still, it's so ridiculous when we listen to your stories. And let's face it. The whole process of accession for each country who once did it was transformative. And I recall myself living in Czech Republic that it was years before the accession where so many reforms happened, and I think that we are just ridiculous ourselves because you are transforming your country so fast now. The Ukraine is just doing so much, as I said, judicial reform, anti-corruption, the oligarchization, etc., and still fighting. So there will be so much of transformation in the country, I think, after the war is over, and I hope that this will be as soon as possible. And the European Commission at least will do as much, as you said, as it takes not to let Putin prevail. That's what we repeat.
I think that it's very obvious, at least for this audience, that it's not just a war between two states, that this is a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. Because with this war, Putin wants not just to punish Ukrainian people for our democratic choice, which we made 9 years ago during the Revolution of Dignity. With this war, Putin tried to convince that democracy, human rights, and rule of law are fake values because they couldn't protect anyone during the war. And we have to win this value of dimension of this war. We have to demonstrate that Putin is wrong. And for this, we have to demonstrate justice. And I think that justice is very important in this story because all this hell which we now face in Ukraine, it's a result of total impunity which Russia enjoyed for decades, committed horrible crimes in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Georgia, in Mali, in Syria, in Libya, in other countries of the world. They have never been punished. They believe they can do whatever they want. And because for 9 years I worked directly with people who survived hell, I know that these people need to restore not just their broken lives, broken families, broken vision of the future. They need to restore their broken belief that rule of law is essential and justice is possible, even though delayed in time. And this is also a key for a speed of democratic transition, because when you make transformation, it's not enough just to adopt qualities laws or build formal institutions. Values of society always prevails. That's why to demonstrate justice, to punish Putin and his surrounding for this crime of aggression is a way how to contribute to a peace in our part of the world, where Russia for decades uses war crimes as the tool how to win wars and uses the wars as a tool how to achieve their geopolitical interests.
I intend to say amen after any intervention of yours. What is, I believe, in a sense, refreshing for the EU as a project is also that we see such an interest of countries to get in. You know, after Brexit, you started seeing many countries pondering with this option to leave the EU from time to time, even in this country. But when you mentioned the passion, and we can feel it. It's very refreshing for the idea of the EU itself. Number one, number two, when it comes to values, once again, we have been repeating, what values, how much of an importance they are. Yet we find a new significance to the word of values. Actually, that you only now learn, and you travel around the world and you compare that the values is something that can unite us. It's not only economy or culture. This is the values aspect that at the end is something that is the most important. If you share the values, you fight autocracies, you fight autocratic regimes. This is almost as a binary relation. Now you have to make your choice. You're here or you're there. You're with us or you're with them, and it's not an easy exercise. On this exercise, you've got I would say two enemies. And that is the disinformation and the economic situation, because and these two can be even played together. Of course, we all know, and you know it better than anyone else, how strong the influence of disinformation can be, and we know of very concrete targeted activities of third countries, not to name anyone, to influence the political and cultural and everyday life in almost any country. This is the fight we need to fight every day, and in this respect we are in this together. And the second one is the economic situation. Why I'm saying this is that people need to be well off to have even greater understanding for the situation in other countries. When it comes to a situation when people really feel that the economic situation is deteriorating, it's much more difficult to get the noble ideas, as blunt as that. So really it's a joint task to try to preserve in many respects, and I'm not sure if everybody is ready to do sacrifice. So that's something that the politicians, before this is misused by those that will start saying we don't have enough, why are we doing this for someone else? This is something that can be misused, and that's the threat that I feel. I don't know how you feel about this.
You're totally right. Disinformation is a huge threat because war have different dimension, and not just military, but also economic value and informational dimension as well. And this is a very important battle, because if you hack the people, you can define their decision, which means that you can influence not just for their position, but for their actions and behaviors. And this is a very it's a very dangerous tool. And even before this war started in February 2014, the head of Russian army wrote the article where he mentioned that the words, photo, video, and generally text became a new weapon of mass destruction. So Russia was very good prepared for this war. Russia created the whole system of TV channels. Russia bribed not just some politicians, but some journalists in different countries. Russia organized stroll factories. Russia used Russian church and Russian culture studies as a tool, weaponize them just to fulfill their military goals. So now we face with this whole structure, and it's very difficult to overcome the structure with the truth, which means that truths have to be amplified. And when I start to analyze this propaganda, I understood that I can't tackle this propaganda with rational arguments, because it's just another complete different vision of the world. But what can be done is to tell stories, not even provide arguments that you are right and someone is wrong. You have just to tell human stories what happened, and suddenly it's provide the changes. And let me tell you the story. It's a story of children writer Volodymyr Vakulenko, who wrote beautiful stories for children, and entire generation of Ukrainian children grow up on his book. During Russian occupation of Kharkiv region, Volodymyr disappeared, and his family hoped to the last that he's alive, and just like thousands of other Ukrainian civilians are in Russian captivity. But when Ukrainian army liberated Kharkiv region, we found mass graves with dead bodies of people there, men, women, even children. And in the grave under the number 318, we found the body of Volodymyr Vakulenko. And I know his family personally. It was very difficult for them to accept the result of identification. And when people ask me, for what Russians killed children writer, I have only one answer: because they can. Russia is empire, and empire has a center, but has no borders, which means that if he not be able to stop Putin in Ukraine, he will go further with the same tactics, with the same horror, and with the same results.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexandra, for the stories you shared with us. Unfortunately, our time for this European chat is over, so I would like to thank you very much for your comments, for your ideas, for your vision and stories, also for your support you were expressing to Ukrainian people, and I think that you all three deserve huge applause.